What's up? Okay, so Andreesen talking about, we could do this without introspection. So, knock wood, he meant this. If you have integrity and you're building relationships with people and it's inspiring, it seems you would spend less time on introspection. What I do is a daily breakdown every day where I can capture all the things that I learned from the day. So, if he meant all that, then I agree. If he meant having a short memory, I've heard people say this before, it might be a good winning formula for them to forget about failures quickly. I can see the value in it. As long as you capture the lesson of it, then you'll be great. Compassion, listening, kindness, whatever you want to call it. And then I read into this further. I said, that's why they don't, because I was trying to figure out why people are like, oh, don't be compassionate and empathetic. So what could contribute to the conversation is something called ruthless compassion. Being ruthless about getting to the truth of things, or really instead of the word truth, because that I see is largely subjective, reality. Discovering what is real. I mean, everybody's been asking this question for 2,400 years. It's like how to tell what is real and what is not real. How two people look at the same exact thing and take two completely different meanings or takes of it. It would really take me 60 hours of conversations to really share with you everything. But I was listening to Aristotle last night, and it kind of very much encapsulated all of it. I think it was Aristotle, not Dionysus. I'm not sure. I will do a video on that at some point. But yeah, it would take me 60 hours to really have you get it, because people can read it, people can watch a video of it, but unless we're in a conversation about it, it's not it's not going to make the difference. And unless you've read hundreds of books on specifically the topics that would make a difference, and I'll get into that in 1 second, then like what are we even talking about? Because then we don't have the same frame of reference, because you haven't even read the book, and it's like, anyway. So and I'm not saying that I have any answers for you. This isn't about an answer. I don't have any solutions. I have questions. Questions, when you ask yourself them, will give you insights, and then those insights will generate lots and lots and lots of answers. So this is from a conversation with Dr. Jim Doty. He's written apparently a lot of books, but this book was talking about Into the Magic Shop, a neurosurgeon's quest to discover the mysteries of the brain and the secrets of the heart. And the ideas of the forum, it's 3 days of conversations and inquiries, really started this movement of self-transformation in the late 60s. And in some ways, the power, if you will, of positive thinking, although this is more honest thinking. This is not positive thinking, not power positive thinking. That's a completely different conversation, but in a very confrontational way. Okay, so the honest thinking, confrontational. So it's positive, but in a very confrontational way. Okay, so it has to go together with the confrontational part, the ruthless compassion, not just the compassion that allowed you or forced you to perhaps look at your bullspit using a term that I think he may have said once or twice. And, there are many ways to deal with find a path through the Dalai Lama. Some find it through spiritual leaders. I have to say that the practice of ruthless compassion, you see, because a lot of people think that compassion is sort of mamby-pamby, and it doesn't really. 1 second. isn't really powerful, but in fact, compassion is really one of the most powerful things. They'll talk about the contribution of compassion on healing. I was blown away by this. And when you are forced to look at, in any very direct way, how you have created the prison that limits you from reaching your own potential and forces you to look at that, what it does is it's an incredible gift, because it gives you the key to open the door. And that's what's really extraordinary. And if you've been seen the power of the forum landmark worldwide, even today, where hundreds of thousands of lives, 5 million lives are changed, you will understand this. Innumerable studies have been done that have demonstrated very scientifically the extraordinary positive effect or impact that these types of trainings have really had on people. And then what, about 1,000 a week do it? I don't remember what the number was. I read it in the last video. And changed definitely in a month. I'd say 2,000 in a month probably. And changed really millions of lives. And the other interesting thing, there are studies that have demonstrated that people who have taken the forum are more empathetic and are more motivated. Let's say empathetic with the confrontation end of things. You know, it's really caring about someone to support them and seeing the root cause to how they could, anyway. And motivated, I'd say inspired, not motivated, but to be of service to others. Because once you can recognize your own suffering and be relieved of that suffering, then you see that so many others are suffering, and that in fact you were empowered to alleviate their suffering. We were having dinner last night, and I absolutely believe it's true that his mission in life is to relieve suffering. And fundamentally, of course, that's what compassion or ruthless compassion is. Without further ado, talking to Ruthless Compassion, thank you so much. Listen, thank you very much for coming and watching this video. You know, I know you have other things to do with your life, and it was really, really, really great for me to see people who have been a big part of my life for a very, very, very long time, and people I feel really close to and have had an extraordinary experience with. But the first thing I need to do is, if you don't really know who James Doty is, you are privileged to be in the presence of a truly extraordinary human being. Jim, let's sit down. If you take the time to look up James Doty on the internet, so that you know who you had the chance to be with, really, really, really makes my hair stand on end when I think about what the guy has accomplished and who more, maybe even more powerfully, who he actually is. It makes me very, very happy, really happy. And I have a lot of respect for both James as an extraordinary surgeon, neurosurgeon, and for James as an extraordinary human being, for his extraordinary generosity and contributions to life. And finally, for his really remarkable, let's see what compassion really is about. And I hope to take some time to tell us about some research because it's quite extraordinary. A matter of fact, Jim's going to leave right after this because he's got to get on an airport to take an airplane, get to the airport, to San Diego, where he's going to give a talk to a whole group of doctors tomorrow about the impact. He'll say more, but about the impact on healing, the impact it has on healing. And so now I have to do two things from me. Most of my brain works okay, or I mean, he was what, in his 80s when he gave this speech, late 70s. But the part that remembers names does not work at all. I mean, I feel like we can all relate to that at one point or another. I happen to say names 3 times when meeting someone, or else I don't get them, and I have to learn something about them as well, like something that's pretty unique. And then I have to make up a nickname about them too, or else it's just like, oh, I don't remember your name. Sometimes it's embarrassing for people when I can't remember the name of, somebody I've known for 20 years, or certainly I can't remember the name of the author of this great book that I read, and so forth. And I want you to know that it does not embarrass me. So you don't need to be embarrassed for me when I can't remember a name. The other thing is that and if you've read that many books, it's like, yeah, of course, I'm going to say things and like know that it came from a book, but it's like, I don't remember the author or the book. The other thing is that I have an ear that doesn't work so well. So that's why I sit on the left ear. This is the good ear. And I want to get to, and I got a ear, nose, and throat doctor, and pokes around in there every 6 months or so to see if there's everything working at any rate. I told him to look at my nose runs all the time. And he says, okay, looked and so forth and said, use this for a week and everything will be fine. So I used it for a week and nothing happened. My nose still ran. And so then he said, this stuff you get at the drugstore, and you put water in a bottle, and you put the stuff in the bottle, and you put the stuff up your nose and your sinuses, and that should take care of everything. And that didn't work either. So finally I went back and he said, no, it didn't work. And he said, have you ever heard of old man's nose drip? So uh now he doesn't bother with my nose anymore, but you'll see me every once in a while take my old man nose drip, and note how many people in there have an old man nose drip. I guess it's an old women's and middle-aged and women drip. So you had a transformational experience yourself crossing the Golden Gate Bridge. This is Jim talking. By accident. Yes, maybe that's how coincidence. Can you just tell us what happened? Yeah, so by the way, I studied every discipline I could follow, participated in it, and I can't think of a discipline that you wouldn't even participated in, and I can't. And I can think of disciplines that you wouldn't even know the name of. They're so weird and far out. But at any rate, I got out of every discipline I ever participated in. I got value out of every discipline I ever participated in. None of them got me, sorry for whatever this got me over the bridge to a really fundamentally transformational experience. And that's what happened. And it turned completely interned completely altered my life and what the experience was. One of first realizing that I wasted my life running after things that had no value and hiding it with all of the knowledge I could gain and all of the things I could compensate and, you know, making money and the things I won't mention here in polite company and all the things that somehow looked like they were what it was about. But on in that moment on the bridge, I realized. He real. Okay, as long as you know this is W talking. W E. On the bridge, I realized it was all hollow, that there was no humanity. Okay, I can fill in. uh, 8th, 9th Avenue in New York. That there was no humanity in it, and that I had really wasted my life. And then, in addition to that, I also realized that I actually didn't know anything. I was truly ignorant because although I had learned a lot during my life, because I loved learning, I everything I knew in order to look good, in order to be smarter, in order to oh yeah, so be smarter than somebody else in order to make money, in order to, but it was all in order to. I didn't know anything for itself. And at the same time, these experiences are difficult to comprehend because at the same time I realized I could know anything that so to speak, the truth, the what matters, that what makes a difference was actually available. And then finally, this is the one that takes a lot more explanation when we're good than when we're going to get into tonight. But I realized that on the next galaxy, looking back at what was in this galaxy, on this earth, nothing was inherently significant. That all of the significance that I had placed on the junk that I had placed the significance on was not inherently significant. And then I looked for what was inherently significant and I couldn't find anything. Nothing inherently significant. And that left me free to be and free to act. I had taken the walls of the prison that I lived in and just disappeared them. I mean, I couldn't reach all the way that way or all the way that way or this way or that what a trick done pretty good down there, by the way. Then, but I could tell that there was no longer any limitation, and that it was up to me, and that it was up to, and that that it was up to me. And by the way, what a me was, I'll get into in a second, but it was up to me to own what I made significant. It belonged to me. I was accountable for it. I was responsible for it. It was up to me to own whatever it was that I would make significant. And I started to live a life of my own making. Jim says, now, though, if we go back to your early background growing up, you married early at 17, and maybe I was this is maybe Lee was 30. Okay. So I was about 30 when I got married. My buddy was October, so I was 29, about to turn 30 in a month. My buddy, I can relate. I was married at 18. Uh, I guess it was so much more mature by then. Yes, now no, but it was a really good thing, Jim, because being a young husband and father, I just had to perform. My family didn't eat if I didn't perform. When I look back, I've forgotten somebody asked me about it. I looked back and I never, ever, ever worked for a salary. Um, After I almost never. I almost always worked on performance, and so it helped to keep me straight. To borrow one of your terms, Jim, very, very hard to yourself when your family depends on your performance. Sorry, so no, but you ended up having four children. The other four children, the other first wife, and but then you urgently I was married to a saint. W E Saint, yeah, really, but then you left, Jim. Yes, I know. I deserted my wife and children. That's a form of leaving. Yeah. Well, no. Jim says that's a form of leaving. WE says no. It's important for me to own the reality of it and to take it on squarely since you brought it up. I'll just tell you, when I reconnected with my family, I had to do it without being sorry for what I did, because that would have alleviated some of the burden of what I did. For me, at least, I was sorry. So, no, I couldn't get away with anything as far as I was concerned, except you deserted your wife and children. And you're going to have to deal with that. And whatever you need to do to balance the books, if you can have, and if you can, what was through the seminal event, though, that made you do, this must be Jim asking, what was the seminal event that made you do that? Was it you were saying, I know nothing had meaning, or I don't know, not I know, but back then it all had to be me, me? Me, me. It was all very, 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 very meaningful and very important and very significant. No, I had gotten myself into a place where I no longer could function effectively. And that what was the genesis of leaving, of deserting, how many of us in this room have done things that we're not necessarily proud of? Or this is Jim asking this. How many of us have done despicable things that we're not proud of? How many are human beings? So if you came west and you mentioned some of the known of the unknown forms of education that you ventured through, were you then, was this, you were looking to find meaning, or just the very nature of how your mind worked drove you to try to understand the human condition, or to explain what was in your head and motivating? Well, to explain myself to myself, to see what might be underneath it all. And that's what got me to read books, and to participate in the disciplines that I participated in. Actually, there's a wonderful quote that says that WE is an authentic American genius who is self, which is really an extraordinary statement to make. But this is the nature of your learning. And so once you had this, if you will, transformational experience, how ultimately did that translate into the creation of the forum training was created? So WE says, yeah, fairly quickly. Actually, you know, it's so long ago now, I can't remember the real time span, and I'm terrible at that. You'll have to ask Hanukkah. How many times, how many years was that? Or when did that happen? Because I'm bad about time, loose about time. But at any rate, it was not long ago after I participated, one of the disciplines I participated in, I saw an opportunity to interact with people in a way that perhaps left them empowered, and that I chose to start doing that. And I did it in that discipline. But then I found that it was so totally inconsistent with the process there that that's when I started the forum. Yeah, okay, okay, okay. So tell me about the forum then. I mean, or maybe obviously most people in here know uh they were doing this in front of a room, but I know it has evolved. But at the time you started it, at least for many, it was very forceful reflection that had people oftentimes crying. Does everybody agree with that? Was I being too kind? Yeah, I mean, there are tears of joy and happiness and relief and really being acknowledged, like hearing what you're thinking, but hearing from somebody else what you were thinking only in your head. You thought it was only you or whatever. But all of you remember it. Don't you you dr- it, no, you dramatically right. Well, for one thing, Jim, it was what was called the forum training. So it was not, I mean, people knew what they were going to, and they were courageous. Well, they knew it was not going to be Sunday school. Yeah, obviously. They didn't know what was going to happen. And what did happen was surprising for people, but just recalling how surprising was for me, you know. But remember, there was an environment in those days in which it was kind of loosey goosey and drop out and blah 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 blah, and it required in the 70s a certain kind of wake call. Zero, when most of us wind up pretty arrogant about who we are. I mean, I know who I am. I've been like this for whatever the heck, and it's been, and I go through life like I'm like this, and for somebody to tell you that maybe that's not who you are, that's tough stuff. And it takes a certain wake up call to recognize that. I don't listen because I've got an already always listening. So I can't hear what you said, and I can't get over there where you are, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to read you a note I just got from our housekeeper that they hired in about 2017.